Okay, that's enough of that. Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about season 5 of Stranger Things. Now, I know this video is extremely late. I know I promised this video like 2 weeks ago, probably at this point by the time you're seeing it. But as you can probably tell by my nasally voice, I have been inflicted with some sort of plague. I went to Florida a week and a half ago to visit my in-laws, and I fully intended when I was there to film when everyone else went to bed, because everyone else goes to bed like 3 hours before I'm able to fall asleep. So I brought my microphone, I brought my MacBook, I brought my tripod with me so that I could film in my room at night and then hopefully do some editing talking about this video. But then went to Epic Universe for the first time, which I had never been. It was a very fun experience, but for the fact that when we were waiting in the new Donkey Kong line, which if you didn't have a fast pass was a 210-minute wait. I mean, it was a fine ride, but it was not worth 210 minutes of my life. I'm going to tell you that right now. But anyway, when we were waiting in line for said ride, there was a concrete divider that would like separate the individual rider line, the fast pass line, and then the regular line. There were children who were scaling said concrete wall, and one child in particular scaled the concrete wall and literally was like eye level at me, was just making loud noises in my direction. And I turned to my husband and was like, that kid is going to get me sick. And then lo and behold, 2 days later, I woke up with whatever plague he infected me with. I have been on the struggle bus and in the trenches of whatever it was that small child gave me in that line ever since, and I have not been feeling up to filming, so I apologize for that. But I have been chomping at the bit wanting to talk about Stranger Things Season 5 ever since the finale dropped, as I'm sure many people who have seen the finale have felt the same way, because there has been a lot that has been going on with this show since the finale aired. I don't think I've really truly seen anything like it, and I'm really excited to talk about it. I'm sorry that I sound like this, but we're just gonna have to deal with it because I cannot wait any longer to get this video out. I really want to talk about it. Spoiler alert! Spoiler! Spoiler! If you have not seen through the finale of Stranger Things, and without further ado, let's get started. I just downed an entire bottle of water after coughing up both of my fucking lungs. If you are new to my channel, hi, hello, my name is Megan. By day, I'm an attorney, and by night I make videos about film and television shows that I find to be interesting. Couple things before we get into this video. Number one, I did a collab video with my friend Ivan, aka Filmer24, talking about Stranger Things Season 5. We had a very unhinged and cathartic and healing conversation about Season 5 of Stranger Things. If you want to go check out that video, please do so. I will link it below. Also, go check out Ivan's content. If you are not subscribed already, please go subscribe. And yeah, thank you so much, Ivan, for putting that together, and I look forward to the next collab video, hopefully soon. Two quick disclaimers before we get into this video, because apparently I'm just going to talk a lot about the video before getting into actually the content of this video. Number one, there are a couple controversial people, I guess you could say, in the cast of Stranger Things Season 5. I mean, I guess, or at least they kind of got themselves into controversy in the time between Seasons 4 and 5, you know, the decade of time between Season 4 and 5 of Stranger Things. There are a couple people that have made some political statements about an international conflict currently going on in the world. There was a person that was accused of maybe harassing other people on set of Stranger Things, but then was also accused of cheating on their spouse several times. I have opinions about all these things, but I'm not going to be sharing any of them ever in any circumstances in my videos, because that's not what I'm here to do on this channel. Any comments I make about somebody's acting performance or about the characters in Stranger Things is specifically just about that. I am not making a comment specifically about who the actor is outside of the show, unless if I specifically state otherwise in the context. I also wanted to kind of just say the following. I get that people love Stranger Things. I do like Stranger Things quite a lot. It's not like my 100% my absolute favorite show, but I do really like it. I watch season 2 and 3 of Stranger Things maybe like once or twice a year because it's like my weird comfort rewatch show. And I've seen every single episode. I haven't been watching since 2016. I think I started watching in 2019. But I would consider myself a fan, right? But there are people who like love the show more than anything in the world. And that's great because I love when people love things. I understand the connection that people have with the show and its characters. Sometimes it almost seems like a parasocial relationship that people feel with the characters. There's a lot of nostalgia that's built around Stranger Things. It invokes a lot of those sentimental feelings. A lot of the characters were young when we met them in season 1, and you basically got to watch them grow up before your very eyes from season to season. They were like 12 in season 1, and now they're like 47 in season 5, especially given the hype and the anticipation surrounding season 5. I know that a lot of the big super fans of Stranger Things had a high high expectations set for how everything was going to wrap up. The discourse surrounding season 5, once everything was said and done and the finale came out, was kind of bonkers to me. I have never really truly seen anything quite like it on the internet. I mean, I haven't seen Game of Thrones, but I know that that was really controversial as well, so maybe it was kind of comparable. I don't know. The discourse surrounding the finale has been so unbelievably polarizing, and of course the loudest voices are the ones that represent the two extremes. On the one hand, you have the camp of people that are like, this was a perfect finale, it was absolutely amazing, it made me sob 75 times, and I haven't stopped crying ever since I watched it. If you have anything negative to say or any criticism or feedback about the finale, you're spreading negativity on the internet, you're a bad person, and you don't understand it. The finale wasn't meant for you if you didn't like it. And then you have people at the opposite end of the spectrum that are like, I had a very specific idea in mind with how I wanted the finale to wrap, and because the finale didn't exactly mirror what I have conjured in my brain in the 3 years that I had to create a finale prediction between season 4 and 5, that means that this is automatically bad and everything about it was terrible and I hated it and I hate the Duffer Brothers and I hate everything that has to do with Stranger Things because it ruined the entire show. Those are the two loudest voices. Those aren't the only voices, obviously. It's kind of creating a crazy rhetoric surrounding Stranger Things. And, you know, I guess that's kind of what you come to expect with the internet, right? I definitely resemble something in the middle of those two extremes. Surprise, I didn't love everything. Surprise, I didn't hate everything. I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy. I never want to just come in and just jump on the bandwagon and shit on something for no reason. And I also am not going to come and sing something's praises if I don't agree with that. I do think Stranger Things is not immune to criticism. It is not special in any way where it's like, okay, we can't say anything bad about it because people really like the characters. Like, that's bullshit in my opinion. It is an art form. Art forms are meant to be criticized as long as you do it with tact and you do it with respect and you do it with the intention of just stating your opinion and not stating your opinion as fact. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. If you disagree with it, that's totally chill because I feel like a lot of people disagree with my opinions and that's totally okay. All that to be said, this is just my opinion. That's my opinion! I'm not trying to persuade you. I'm just trying to tell you how I feel. And if you disagree, that's totally chill. But I think we can all be adults about this and just respect that people can agree to disagree about something that is generally popular. And if we can't, then maybe this isn't the video for you. Hello, it's me. I am no longer sick. Well, I'm still a little sick. I'm still like coughing gross things out of my lungs, as if you guys needed to know that. But I sound a lot better probably. So I've probably at this point said a lot to preface this video, a lot of disclaimers, a lot of boundary setting, I guess, and expectation setting, if you will, about this particular conversation before we actually get into the subject at hand. So after all that has been said and done, I now am prepared to talk about my thoughts and opinions on season 5 of Stranger Things. And my thoughts and opinions on season 5 of Stranger Things is that it was okay. It was fine. I truly feel like I am just straight down the middle on this particular season. I liked as many things as I disliked. I truly have never felt so like in the middle about something that has been this discussed and this scrutinized on the internet in a very long time. There were certainly things that I liked and enjoyed and appreciated about this season, and there was a lot of things that I really did not like and appreciate, and I thought were quite bad, in fact. But I think taking them together and after putting my presentation together and, you know, my notes and everything for this video, maybe my thoughts will change as I start talking, but really at this point, I feel like I am just medium about season 5. It's not the best thing I've ever seen, like people are saying. They're calling it a cinematic masterpiece, which I think is kind of crazy. But then there are also people saying that this season was so bad that they can never watch Stranger Things like ever again. And I certainly don't feel that way. Do I think I will ever actually watch it again? Probably not, because I don't think there's a whole lot of rewatchability. I would say at this point, if I had to rank them, and I'm trying to think of what I said on Ivan's channel. I think I said from best to worst, I would rank the seasons 1, 3, 2, 4, 5. I do think the 5th season is very, very squarely behind the other 4, and it's not really close for me. I think the biggest issue with this season is that a lot of it feels like it exists for no other reason than to give answers to some of the things that are still left in the air. But like it almost was created as an obligation to the fans to just, you know, settle certain things and resolve the story, whereas the other seasons felt like there was a really clear present vision with the story, with the characters, with everything that's going on in the finished product. I just didn't get that sense in the 5th season. It just felt like a little bit hollow. Certain things just didn't seem to add up. I feel like the writing and the character development and some of the performances as well just felt like they were, I don't want to say phoned in because that always sounds really fucking mean. I didn't feel the heart in this season. And I know that's kind of like an intangible, extremely subjective take, but that's just kind of the vibe that I get. There was a lot of issues with continuity, and we'll talk about those things later. And sometimes continuity is not a big deal for people. I feel like I, again, go 50-50 on it, where I'm not going to be like the continuity police here on YouTube, but I also do feel like when you're creating a story that's supposed to have been in concept from the beginning of the series, things should make sense if you're taking this long to put out a finished product. There were a lot of complicated nuances to this season that make me feel ultimately, when you take and weigh everything together, pretty neutral about it. Like I said, I don't think I'll ever watch it again unless if somebody in my life is just really, really desperate to want to watch the worst season of Stranger Things with me. But again, there are way worse seasons of television, and it's not to say that I didn't enjoy certain aspects of this watching experience. Okay, just to be fully and truly transparent with you all, a couple days ago there was a spider that got loose in my office and vanished. Now I don't know where it is. I initially, when I see spiders, I like to kind of like shoo them away from my space because I don't like spiders like in my space. In this particular instance, for some reason, I had like a moment of empathy and kind of like a connection and understanding with the spider. It's cold, it's tired, it doesn't want to go outside because it will freeze to death surely. It just wants to kind of chill on the little arm that holds my microphone. And I was like, you know what, spider, as long as you're not in my face and you don't like swing down with your spider web and try to attack me, you can hang out there. And so for the good 24 hours we coexisted successfully. And then while I was trying to film the other day, the spider like swung down and like went like this with its arms, and then it looked like it was trying to attack me, and then it vanished. And I haven't seen it since. So I've been very on edge existing in my office because I feel like the spider is just going to come out and like attack me or something. Of course, I also have a cat that is ferocious and will literally hunt my brother, but will not fuck with bugs. My cat is now taking a shit in the litter box as soon as I start filming, which is amazing. Let's start off by talking about where we're starting out in season 5. Now, as we recall, very famously at the end of season 4, Vecna was successful in briefly killing Max, and he needed to kill Max because in order to open, I think, like a gateway or a portal between the right side up and the upside down, he needed to kill 4 people. And he briefly did that with Max, but Elle was able to bring her back to life. She's now in a coma, all of that. And now he basically is able to like rip a giant hole in what looks like into hell across Hawkins. People's homes are being destroyed. It's just chaos and pandemonium. It literally looks like the apocalypse. The sky is red. It looks like asbestos is falling down from the sky. There's decay and destruction. Things are just dying right before our eyes. It's a very scary time. It almost feels like season 4's ending is like a very Empire Strikes Back / Infinity War-esque chapter in this story. Going into season 5, we take an 18-month time jump. Hawkins is under military quarantine. No one's allowed in or out. There's like people that are bringing in supplies to the city. And it seems like everyone is being told it's because there was a crazy earthquake. It requires constant military occupation and a giant border built around the center of town, because that's where the gate is, but not everyone seems to know that in Hawkins. So if I were a random person in Hawkins, I would be kind of wondering what the fuck is going on. Everyone's just kind of going about their day weirdly. Joyce is back in town with her sons and living on Mike Wheeler's couch, and it just seems like everyone's just kind of living their life. Military, I don't really understand what excuse they gave to the townspeople as to why they're still here. Obviously, as an audience, we know that they're here because there is a gate into the Upside Down, and it seems like they're kind of constantly going in there for whatever reason. They're here because they're trying to find Elle, because that's what they were doing all of last season. It turns out that Elle is, in fact, in Hawkins, and the big bad military still has not been able to figure that out or find her. She's living at Hopper's cabin because Hopper is dead, according to everybody in town. They don't know that he was in a Russian prison for the last year or so, and she's training, kind of looks like Rey Skywalker training that she did in The Rise of Skywalker, where she's just kind of doing a weird obstacle course. The teenagers, the former teenagers, and by that I mean Robin, Steve, Jonathan, and Nancy, have graduated from high school at this point and are not allowed to go to college because no one's allowed to leave apparently, and they're working at the radio station because I'll be damned if Robin and Steve are without a job even when the world is ending. Things might seem like everything is status
quo, everything is normal other than the military occupation in the center of town. In reality, our main characters are trying to defeat Vecna, but they're doing it on the DL because, like I said, the military is just up everyone's ass. So they're doing these things called crawls. Now, what happens essentially is that the team that works at the radio station, the teenagers, the former teenagers, no, young adults at this point, everyone is a young adult at this point. Team Steve essentially is communicating with everybody else by different codes that Robin is incorporating into her radio show that she does every day. And that communicates with everybody else about meeting times, meeting locations, to basically smuggle Hopper into the Upside Down so that they can try to look around, find Vecna, and kill him. And this has been going on for the past 18 months, and so far, in the number of crawls that they have done, they have not found him, and they have not been even remotely successful in even like finding a lead on where he is. And it's been getting very frustrating for everybody involved. Now, where is Vecna at the beginning of season 5? Well, apparently, he is trying to invade the minds of different children. He is now in need of people that he needs to like steal their life forces or whatever. So he's appearing to these various different elementary school grade children, aka Holly Wheeler being one of them, Mike and Nancy's sister, and is appearing to them as like a kind man identified as Mr. Whatsit. No one else can see them, but like Holly can see Mr. Whatsit, you know, in her mind. Let's talk a little bit about the writing of season 5 of Stranger Things. I have no words. Well, I do. The writing was bad. Those are the words. I was shocked at how bad the writing of season 5 was, especially because when you think about the other seasons of Stranger Things, there's always a relatively consistent quality of writing in terms of like the dialogue, the pacing, the plot points, the tone. Season 5 almost felt like it was written by somebody else, but there's tea on that and we'll talk about that a little bit later. I was distracted by how bad the writing was in some instances, and that's really a shame. I would say the first couple episodes were okay. It wasn't like to the point where I was distracted by how bad the writing was. There were some like moments of clunky dialogue, and obviously like the beginning episodes of the season are going to be exposition heavy, but it was still like, it was serviceable, it was fine, I was vibing. A cliffhanger at the end of the first volume, I was very much excited to see what happened next. But as we got into the second and third volume, you know, the part where the climax is supposed to happen, that's where I feel like everything really truly fell apart in terms of writing. It felt like the writers had a checklist of all of the different plot points that needed to happen in the story, and rather than focusing on like how can we poetically and masterfully and craftily put together a story that's going to portray these things in a creative and interesting way, let's just bulldoze through all of this information, just kind of like throw it at the audience. It's, you know, like I have this information, but it wasn't presented in a very pleasant way. So I'm not entertained or enjoying what is being presented to me because it didn't feel like there was any care or consideration into the execution. And that's what I'm here for. I'm not here for the information. I'm here for how it's presented to me. And if how it's being presented to me doesn't make me feel anything, then that's a fucking problem. I also just kind of especially take issue with the quality of writing when you think about all of the times that the Duffer Brothers in the past have said that this story and everything that's happened thus far has been working towards a particular vision that they had since the beginning of the series. This isn't just like let's just kind of make up the story as we go, kind of like Only Murders in the Building, I guess. They've been presenting this story to us as something that they've been thinking about and formulating for a couple years now. They also had 3 years to make season 5. And you would think they would make some of the decisions in season 4 with an idea of what season 5 was going to look like as well. The fact that they had this much time and created this much anticipation surrounding the 5th season, and this is the writing that you're given to me, I don't really necessarily think that's acceptable. Outfit change number 3. If you hear a car alarm going off faintly in the background, that's because there is a car alarm, in fact, going off faintly in the background, and we're going to just have to deal with that. I want to talk a little bit about why exactly I hated the writing in season 5 of Stranger Things. If you were wondering, am I going to go through and itemize every single category of writing that this show failed to accomplish? Well, yes, I am going to be doing that right now. Let's start by talking about the dialogue of Stranger Things season 5, because holy shit, the dialogue was really fucking bad.
I say kick away. Stop this meathead from reproducing and further infecting the world with his unique brand of idiocy.
Oh boy. I usually felt like the dialogue in Stranger Things is pretty good. Like I said, the writing in general for this show in prior seasons has always held to a pretty high standard in my brain. I don't know what the fuck happened in season 5.
Too big, it's not gonna fit.
Steve hears that all the time and he goes in anyway, don't you, Steve?
What the hell's wrong with you?
I think by the 5th episode, especially once we got into volume 2, I was like, I have no earthly idea why they're talking like aliens that took over somebody's body and are trying to pass off as humans. Again, we're saying things to convey information, but not to make it sound good. And that's kind of like a common theme. It doesn't sound like A, how these characters would talk based on what we know about them in the past, and B, how a human being would just talk given the circumstances and given the time period. I also noticed this thing, and I know this is just a me thing probably, but I notice it every single fucking time. Star Wars does this too, and I hate when Star Wars does it because it's really frustrating. Stranger Things did this thing with its writing in the 5th season where it would incorporate references to lines of dialogue that reference lines of dialogue that occurred in prior seasons.
Sweeter, bolder, better. Plan is faster, bolder, better.
And I don't know what is wrong with my brain or how it's wired. Like maybe this is like an ADHD side effect that I'm now experiencing at my ripe old age of 30. I can like immediately pinpoint what they're referencing, and they're trying to do it in a way that's kind of like a wink and a nod, I think, to the people who are like super fans or people who are like me and are deeply, deeply, deeply mentally ill. I notice it every time and it bothers me every time. Now, I'm not saying you can't have references to things because that's kind of like the fun of what we're doing here, and especially when you have a huge fan base. It's fun to kind of give a little wink and a nod to things of the past, but when you're doing that and kind of focusing on incorporating those things into the story, it's so many other aspects of the writing is weak and just feels like it was thrown together. I don't want you to fucking focus on the cute little reference of Murray saying "let there be light" in episode 8
and let there be light
to reference Steve saying that in season 3 episode 1.
let there be light.
I don't want to fucking hear that. But I feel, again, this is kind of like a bigger theme with Stranger Things season 5, where they're pandering more to just making the super fans happy rather than putting together an actually good finished product. And I find that to be a little bit annoying. I also want to talk... We'll talk about the characters and just the sheer volume of people that were in this season in the next section here, but just for now, what I will say, there were a lot of scenes where there were a lot of fucking people just sitting around, and Stranger Things has this trope where all of the characters realize a plan by like using all these different metaphors of like random objects in a room, and they're formulating a strategy of whatever they need to do in a particular situation. What kind of started getting to me with specifically pertaining to the dialogue in those scenes, you have so many people, and people have to talk over each other, and everyone kind of needs their moment to speak so that we can be reminded that these characters are in fact contributing and they are in fact in the room. The way that it was performed, like Mike would say something and he'd be like, wait a second, I thought, and then somebody has to cut him off, but then there would be like a beat, like a pause. He doesn't have anything else to say because the script says, you know, wait to be interrupted by Dustin or something. And it didn't sound natural. It just sounded extremely scripted and rehearsed. It didn't sound like actual people talking over each other or collaborating in a room. Also, speaking of people talking with each other, you know, dialogue. I also want to talk a little bit about the fuck-ass emotional conversations that everybody was having every 5 minutes in this season while the world was literally ending. I felt like the show didn't really know what to do in the downtime between a lot of the action and intense things happening, so they were just having people have these stupid emotional conversations, many of which have already been had in prior seasons or even earlier in this season, but we're just reiterating it or having the same kind of conversation over and over and over again because we don't know what else to do or put in the script. For example, I feel like it has been a consistent theme every single fucking year that Joyce doesn't trust Will. You know, she doesn't understand that he is an adult, or the actor is an adult. Obviously, all these people are like in their 20s now. He's becoming an adult and he needs to be trusted, and, you know, she needs to stop babying him and treating him like a baby. He just is getting frustrated about that, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I realize, you know, you're growing up so fast and I need to trust you. And then bam, 2 minutes later, she's doing it again, and they need to have another conversation about it. You guys have had the same fucking conversation like 4 times now in this series. Do we really need to have this and revisit this again? Kind of feels like we don't know what else to do, so let's have Will kind of tear up a little bit and Joyce tear up a little bit, and they talk about how much they love and respect each other, blah, blah, blah. I think the biggest example of this was, of course, Will's coming out scene. Will's sexuality was basically being used against him by Vecna, and he felt like he needed to tell his friends and family that he was gay so that they wouldn't, like, be caught off guard by this in the middle of a fight or something and that they would hate him. I understand for the purpose of the plot why it needed to happen, I guess. I'm not trying to shed light on the meaning of what Will was trying to do, but the conversation itself was so poorly written, I couldn't believe what I was watching. I saw of memes about it before I actually saw the episode, and I was like, surely the internet is just taking this too far. And then I watched it and I was like, oh no, this is really bad. First of all, you're having this very emotional conversation in a room of 30 people, half of which don't really even know Will that well. Kylie, who was talking to Elle maybe like 10 minutes prior about how they're gonna have to kill themselves later that night so that they can end the cycle, is like listening to Will have this very long conversation about his friends and coming out of the closet, and she's like, I don't even know who the fuck Will is. We're planning for the end of the world and the fight to end all fights, but let's have a very, very, very long, drawn out conversation while Will is basically holding court. It just felt like there was no intimacy to a moment that should have had a lot more emotion associated with it. And here's the thing too, here's the big fucking kicker for anyone who's forgotten.
I say kick away.
Robin had the most beautiful and nuanced and just well executed coming out scene, and Steve's reaction to it was perfect. It was beautiful. It solidified their friendship, and it was just, it's one of my favorite scenes in the entire series. So the show is capable of making these beautiful intimate moments. It just felt like you should feel emotions to this because you like Will and you care about him, not because the execution of it is actually good or making you feel anything. Now let's talk about the pacing of season 5 of Stranger Things, because no, I am not done bitching about the writing of this season. Pacing was pretty erratic throughout the entirety of the season. I will say the first couple episodes, like the first volume in general, had pretty decent pacing, or pretty standard pacing that I would expect for the first couple episodes of a show like this. We're spending a lot of time catching us up on what's been happening the last 18 months, and then also laying the foundation for the conflict that's going to occur for the rest of the season. But it's a rather linear trajectory, and I feel like it's handled relatively well. The way that the characters kind of move from one event to the other is relatively standard, relatively well paced, and I feel like also it built up to a pretty great cliffhanger for the first volume, where we find out Will has this connection to Vecna, and he has finally been able to tap into his powers and in some limited instances control Vecna, and he essentially saves his friends from getting fucked over by a Demogorgon. As we move into the other volumes, however, not superb. I would say probably actually the word would be bad. The fuck-ass conversations, like I said, really truly did a number on the pacing in a lot of instances. It should not be lost on any single person in this story that the stakes of this situation are like the world as we know it ending. And yet we have time for these stupid conversations that we have had a million times. Characters bickering about dumb things, characters getting upset with each other, and like it's like we don't have time to deal with this. It just makes you feel like, okay, we're spending so much time on this, but my brain is still wondering what the hell is going on with the other aspects of the story that feel far more compelling. And because there are so many characters that we have to keep switching back to, things that are interesting and the things that should be captivating your attention, like in my opinion, trying to figure out where Holly is, when we have to switch away from that because we have so many other characters, it does kill the pacing a little bit, and it does kind of ruin any forward momentum that you might have in the story. The finale definitely felt a little bit jarring with its pacing. There is a statistic going around online that Will's coming out scene took more time than technically the fight between Vecna and Elle. I'm not trying to drag on the emotional stakes of what it meant for Will to come out of the closet, just more on the execution of that scene. And once again, spending that much time on something that could have been handled in a more emotional and yet less time-consuming way, it kills the plot. But yet, when we have the main climax, the thing that everybody has been waiting for, Elle versus Vecna, it took like 6 minutes or something like that. And I know everybody is going to come in the comment section and be like, well, that's the whole fucking point actually, because Vecna is a very weak-minded person, and it really just illuminated the fact that he is not a very powerful opponent. Like, no. This is bad pacing. We're just gonna have to accept that. I also want to talk a little bit about the tone and the tension building that we have in season 5 of Stranger Things, because I really don't feel like there was any. I want to first kind of point out just the fact that this season takes place 18 months after the events of season 4, which for me did a lot to dilute any bit of tension and any bit of anticipation and dread that season 4 worked so hard to build throughout those episodes. I understand that like Vecna was injured or whatever, and maybe he needed to kind of regroup as well, but the stakes of that whole finale, it seemed like, wow, this is really fucking scary and bad. Then we pick up in season 5, and yes, there is a military occupation in Hawkins, and yes, the gate still exists, but our characters are like going to school. Robin and Steve have jobs, and Robin's going on dates with Vicky, and it's like, I understand that like life doesn't have to stop completely. Given the fact that really nothing has happened in 18 months and we haven't even seen Vecna in 18 months, it just kind of dilutes the impact of that finale. Like, okay, he had this big grand plan and then nothing happened. Know why they had to do it is because they wanted to have Holly to be old enough so that she could have this whole storyline, because it would look kind of silly if she was like, you know, looking 10 years old in one scene and then looked 15 years old in another scene, and it was supposed to be like a couple months later. Like, imagine if that happened in Stranger Things, like if the characters just looked wildly different ages despite having taken place only a couple months apart. Like, that would be so crazy and weird if that happened. Like, imagine if that happened. That would really take you out of the story, I would think. I do like the Holly storyline. I felt like the actress was really good, and that was an interesting, compelling take on everything going on. But in general, you have to kind of weigh the cost-benefit analysis of like, okay, we could have this cool Holly storyline, but also it kind of dilutes and takes back a lot of the goodwill and the tension that we've built from season 4. And then throughout the season as well, the show didn't really do a whole heck of a lot for me personally to like build up tension and tone building and like suspense, you know what I mean? This show in the past has always done a really good job of introducing a ticking clock element in various different forms. I mean, I guess go figure, literally in season 4 there was a ticking clock element. Anyways, there's always like external threats that are going on other than the monsters that we're dealing with. There's always a sense of urgency and a sense of like, if we don't do this goal like right fucking now, it's going to be really bad. People are going to die. In season 1, you had obviously the monsters and the Demogorgons and everything, but you also had the government and this constant sense of feeling like people are watching you and they're going to come and fucking kill you. Season 2, you had the government again, but you also had like Billy, who was just kind of chaotic. Season 3, you had the Russians in the mall. And then in season 4, you had, you know, the entire town and the government thinking that D&D was like satanic worshiping and constantly trying to go after our main character. Also, the fact that Max's brain was essentially invaded and that she was basically marked for death by Vecna. So every season has these amazing additional layers of tension other than the Mind Flayer, the Shadow Monster, or whatever it is we're dealing with, Vecna, I guess. And it adds additional layers of suspense and urgency for what our characters are doing. This season, you know, you would think that the fact that Vecna is trying to like collide worlds and essentially end life as we know it, you think that would kind of put a little bit of a fire under our characters' asses. But again, like I said, we have time for everybody to sit and have a fuck-ass conversation about things. Also, the military, which is supposed to be like kind of that external threat that adds additional layers of intensity to this story, they just kind of felt like a non-issue. Like, yes, they were hunting down Elle, but they felt more like an annoyance. Like that one kid in season 4, the high school bully, he was scarier than the entire fucking military in this season. Overall, I feel like the writing in the show was very, very strange this season. Didn't really necessarily like how a lot of it was handled, and it just felt like a different person wrote it. Given the fact that there's been so much anticipation and build up to this finale, and given the fact that the Duffer Brothers keep saying this is what they've been working towards the entire time, I don't necessarily know if it was worth it, Diva. Outfit change number 4. I'm wearing a t-shirt with 2 cats drinking sake together because I felt like that kind of matched the vibe. Also, I'm sorry my hair looks like shit, but it's because I just took a shower. So it's kind of like doing its air drying thing right now. We're also dealing with the elements. So the characters in season 5 of Stranger Things. I don't really know what else there is to say other than there's just too many fucking people.
There's too many of them.
There is an ungodly amount of people in the main role and supporting cast of Stranger Things Season 5, and I feel like it has a negative impact on pretty much everything that happens in this season. This show in the past has put forth some exceptional characters. It does a really great job consistently of, you know, developing its main characters, giving them good arcs, giving them good writing and all of that, and just phenomenal casting and acting performances for the most part across the board with this show in every single season. But they also do a good job of like folding in new people with each year, and they integrate well with the cast. They contribute well. The casting, like I said, is always really, really good. They do a good job, the writers, of creating a sort of like subverting of expectations with a lot of these characters where you think you have them figured out, and then they add kind of an additional wrinkle where you really understand and relate to them in a short amount of time. And when something happens to them, because usually it's only the side characters that get killed off in this show, you feel an emotional attachment to them and you really feel like an impact of their loss. I also just think generally too that the young age of a lot of our main characters and the fact that we've been watching them grow up before our very eyes across these 10 years, you don't want to see anything bad happen to them. And I feel like as a writer of the show too, the Duffer Brothers, understandably so, probably feel that attachment to the people they've been working with for a decade and the characters that they've been growing and developing, and they don't want to see anything bad happen to them too. And I understand that. Ultimately, when you are a writer, you have the objective responsibility to do what's best for the overall finished product. You're not technically supposed to be pandering to the audience first and creating a good finished product second, at least in my opinion. And I feel like that's what happened in Stranger Things season 5. You were so focused on keeping everybody in, not wanting to kill anybody, not wanting to upset the audiences, blah, 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 that we just had this kind of awkward mess of so many goddamn characters in this story that it didn't really make a lot of sense. There were characters that it's like you might as well have been dead because you didn't really contribute or do anything at all. Then you had a bunch of storylines we had to focus on because we had 50 people and we had to like break everybody up into 7 different groups, and the characters that are important and that should have more fleshed out and things to do feel like their stories are being rushed because we have to figure out what the fuck Mike is doing. A lot of people have been calling for Stranger Things to kill off more characters since I think like season 3, because it seems like the main characters just have ungodly amounts of like plot armor and plot protection and things like that. And I'm not saying that the show has to be like a gory, bloody mess. I wouldn't really like to watch that. I do think it was ultimately the responsibility of the writers to kind of recognize that if you're going to be introducing new people every season, you really should have started tapering down some of these other characters to make room for new people, maybe as early as like season 2. I know that a lot of the people online who are like diehard fans of Stranger Things that are saying like we shouldn't have to kill all the characters off and that's not what this type of show is, and it's about nostalgia and friendship and all of that, and just to murder people off would not be good for the characters. It would not be good for just what the spirit of the show is. I understand that it's hard to see characters that you love die, but also not everybody really gets a happy end, and I think it's not doing the characters justice to drag them out further than what feels natural. I also do think that Stranger Things is technically in the horror genre, and the stakes of Stranger Things season 5 and what's going on in the story and what the villain is trying to do are quite intense and quite like crazy. The fact, just logically speaking, that everybody makes it out unscathed and unharmed, and the only person that kind of dies from the main cast does so by her own choice, it kind of dilutes the intensity and the stakes of what we're dealing with here because the plot is just protecting all of our characters. That probably wouldn't happen given the magnitude of what's going on. It would have raised the stakes. It would have just given more of an urgency to the story that, like I said in the last section, season 5 desperately lacked. Just, kind of talking off the top of my head here, some characters that I feel like would have been helpful if they died. Hopper, if he died in season 3, and I think Kali, it made sense that she did die. Jonathan and Nancy have nothing against the characters necessarily. I do think that when they were like giving their confessions to each other about how they shouldn't be together anymore, I felt like that would have been a good punctuation point to their story. It would have raised stakes for both Mike and Will. Maybe it would have reminded Joyce that she had another son once he died. I do actually think too that Will probably should have died, and by probably I mean he definitely should have died based on the rules that were presented in this story. He kept talking about the hive mind and how when the body dies, everything else dies, and Will has been described many times as being part of the hive mind, so when they killed the mind flayer or whatever, Will probably should have died too. If you're presenting rules specifically in this story and reiterating them many, many times, stick to your rules, or make some bullshit reason for why Will didn't die, but we didn't get that, and he's just alive, and I'm like, I don't understand how or why this is happening. I also really, and again, I'm not wishing death on these people. Maybe we could have killed off Murray, or maybe we could have killed off Mr. Wheeler. Mr. Wheeler got decked by a Demogorgon. We can't even kill off Mr. Wheeler. Can't even kill off Murray, and he fucking sucks, and he just sits there and runs his mouth and says unfunny, sarcastic comments the whole time.
It's funny.
And I really wish the Duffer Brothers were a little bit more objective with these decisions, especially when they were running their mouths on all the press tours talking about how all these people are going to die and how this is going to be a really dark season. Is the darkness in the room with us? Because I simply do not believe that. I now want to transition into a section I like to call random things about the characters in season 5 of Stranger Things that I did not enjoy and that annoyed me. And I know I'm not getting creativity points for the title of this section, but I have a lot of things I want to complain about. I feel like the acting performances across the board, other than the finale and other than a couple random instances throughout the season, were on the whole pretty disappointing and bad. I usually don't like to come for people's acting performances because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes that might have procured that type of performance, especially compared to the quality of other performances in prior seasons. This was alarmingly bad, and I do think that it kind of diminished my ability to invest in the characters or invest in what was going on. Will's performance when he was possessing Vecna and doing like this, like, he slayed that. Like, definitely cinema. When he screamed run, I was like, holy shit, this is so good. When he's doing literally anything else, I feel like his portrayal of various different emotions is extremely one note. Like, he kind of plays everything the same, like kind of teary-eyed, kind of wispy-eyed, you know. Millie Bobby Brown too, the energy that she was bringing in certain scenes did not match what was actually happening in the plot. For example, Max came out of a coma. You know, we just had this beautiful scene of like Max crying and Lucas crying. I'm fucking crying. Everybody in the room is crying because of just how beautiful and emotional it was. Elle runs over, keeping in mind too that she was unsuccessful in preventing Max from falling into a coma, and this is like her best friend and all of this and that. And she's like, Max, is it really you? And it's like, girl, are you fucking serious? If I came out of a coma and my best friend reacted that way, I would just fall back into the coma just out of spite. You are not bringing the energy that I feel like I deserve right now. But that's just me. So I don't know. I don't know what contributed to this, but it felt like there were a lot of instances like that where the emotions that are being conveyed were just like the actors saying the lines, and that was supposed to be enough to convey the emotion rather than actually like fucking acting it. I also feel like there were a lot of character conflicts that felt very forced. It seemed like Joyce didn't have much to do this season, and all she really was given by the writers was to have these moments where she was just like treating Will like a 5-year-old. Like, there was a scene in the car where she was talking to Robin about Will when Will was literally in the passenger seat. The problem is, like, we've had this conflict a lot of times in the past, and then that's like a growing moment until the next time that Joyce forgets it, and then we have to do it again. Same can be said for Elle and Hopper. I mean, granted, it culminated in the fact that Elle had to tell Hopper, you have to trust me to make my own decisions so that I can die and sacrifice myself. So I guess we had to kind of reiterate that point to build up to that moment. There have been a lot of conversations in prior seasons. Elle wants to do something. Hopper is like, you're going to expend too much of your power. And she's like, you need to trust me. And then he learns to do that. And then she defeats the big bad, whatever. It's like rinse and repeat. Nancy versus Jonathan versus Steve. The fact that we are under military occupation, Holly Wheeler has been kidnapped by a Demogorgon and she is in the abyss and also trapped in Vecna's mind. Nancy and Mike's parents are in intensive care at the hospital and their dad is in a coma. And yet we have this fuck-ass competition between Jonathan and Steve trying to vie for Nancy's attention while we're trying to also prevent the end of the world. Are we really going to have this conversation? And then I think it's also worth mentioning Dustin versus Steve. I understand Dustin's feelings about, just being still really upset and reeling in Eddie's death by vampire Demogorgon bats or whatever the hell happened at the end of season 4. That being said, and I don't want to sound insensitive here, but like that happened a year and a half ago. And yes, everybody in the show desperately needs therapy for all of the trauma that they have experienced collectively. It seems like Dustin's reaction and the strength of his reaction in the beginning of this season, which is contributing to the conflict that he's having with Steve, is like as if Eddie died a month ago. And I understand like time doesn't necessarily heal all wounds, but he is acting like this is a very, very, very fresh wound. And I think, again, that kind of is the problem with pushing this season to 18 months after the finale of season 4. Things can't necessarily just pick up right where they left off, but we're also acting like certain things are picking up where they left off. It makes the conflict between Dustin and Steve feel a little bit forced. It's like in 18 months, Steve couldn't put together that Dustin is still upset that Eddie is dead and didn't have a conversation with him. They're just bickering for 18 months. It seems a little bit unlikely given the relationship that they've had. So after spending an ungodly amount of time being negative and basically a hater about the things I didn't like with the characters in season 5 of Stranger Things, I think it's now an appropriate time to talk about the things that I did like, because like I said, I think I liked about as many things as I disliked in this season. It's probably 60-40 if I'm being honest, so dislike to like ratio. Now, like I said, I do think that the conflict between Steve and Dustin felt a little bit convoluted in season 5. However, that whole scene where like Steve was about to jump over the staircase with the mysterious plot armor goo, the fact that Dustin stopped him and was like, I can't lose you too, and then he like cries in his arms. That was a really, really nice moment. I feel like it was a good punctuation to that conflict, and I just thought it was really well performed. It did make me cry because I do love Dusty Buns and I do love Steve. I also liked Nancy and Jonathan's conversation. I felt like it was very honest to both of their characters. It did acknowledge the fact that they have this shared trauma and they'll always have that shared trauma and probably will always have that bond and friendship and love for each other, but that's not going to be enough to have a sustained and happy relationship because they're just two different people. And the acting was very good. I will say that Jonathan taking Nancy's favorite pink sweater and donating it without telling her because he doesn't like her wearing the color pink, and then her constantly searching for her favorite sweater and probably is like gaslighting herself because she thinks it has to be somewhere, but she doesn't know that her boyfriend donated it because he doesn't like the color pink. That's crazy. That's not a fun anecdote, Jonathan. That's like you being an asshole. Obviously, Max coming out of the coma was just really emotional, very well performed. They're both amazing actors. I'm really happy that Lucas has been given more to do in season 4 and 5. His acting has always been really good, and I just like what they've done with his trajectory. Sadie Sink is also just amazing throughout this entire series. Karen Wheeler, I don't have anything else to say but to salute to you. Yes, you probably should have died from the wounds you sustained, you know, getting slit in the throat by a literal full-ass Demogorgon. But the fact that you had the forethought to put an oxygen tank in the washing machine to murder all of these giant demons that basically almost killed you and your husband a couple days prior. Karen Wheeler for president, I'll just say it. I do really like the scene also between Mike and Hopper in the finale when they talk about grief and acceptance and not putting too much blame on yourself for what happened with Elle. I think that they both have had a little bit of a strained relationship in the past, and the fact that they were able to kind of come together and offer support and just kind of talk candidly about them missing Elle and how to move on with life. I thought that was really well performed, really just nice, sweet, quiet moment. I also liked the scene between Elle and Mike saying goodbye to each other in her little mind black hole thing that she has. I thought that was really well performed. And also Elle's scene with Hopper in the finale was very emotional, well performed, all of that. Very good job. I want to talk a little bit about Holly. Holly, for all intents and purposes, is basically a new character to us. Yes, we knew that she was Nancy and Mike's little sister in prior seasons, and we saw her like maybe a handful of times in the past, but she was kind of like too young to have any sort of impact on anything. So for all intents and purposes, this Holly is a new character. And I kind of inherently in some ways have a little bit of an issue with her taking the extreme like center stage role that she did in this season, because like shouldn't it be somebody else like that we already know and are familiar with rather than us having to learn about Holly and all of her friends? That being said, if you're taking this direction, I will concede that I think that her scenes and the whole dynamic with Vecna was the most intriguing, was the most scary and creepy and nerve-wracking aspect of the show, but in a good way. Like in this season, I feel like that was the most effective parts of the story. I thought Holly's performance was really good. I also thought that everything having to do with Vecna, so fucking good. This actor, he is the only one that was like consistently clocked in every single possible scene. I do not think that they did him sufficient justice in his ending and all of that, but I thought that this was just like a very amazing performance by him. Mr. Clark trying to do everything in his power to save Dustin despite not really understanding anything that's happening, and also kind of just being thrown violently into the world and the reality that is the Upside Down and the Abyss and everything that's going on. The fact that he was just kind of game to do that because he loved Dusty Buns so much, I love him.
That actually means a lot to me.
There is a reason why Mr. Clark and Steve are both on my list of fictional characters that I would literally die for. It's because of this. It's because he is a team player. He won't ask questions. He will use science for good.
Hi, Lulu. Hi, sweet girl.
Outfit change number 5. I think that was the first rendition of Mambo number 5, but then the people who wrote the song realized that it didn't make any sense. So here we are. I am also clearly dealing with the elements right now. But if there is any sunlight in Cleveland, then I guess that is a good thing. But look at the sweater I'm wearing. Look at this. Only real ones will understand why this is culture and why this is significant, and if you don't understand, then I really don't have time to explain culture and historical significance to you. I want to talk about something I like to call the film mechanics of Stranger Things, and by film mechanics, I mean just like everything that doesn't go into the high-level concept and idea of the story, but what goes into the actual execution of the finished product of the episode. For the most part, like everything else with Season 5 of Stranger Things, the quote-unquote film mechanics, as I'm calling them, kind of feels like a little bit of a mixed bag when taken together. On the positive end, I will say, I really think that the hair and makeups and costume design of Stranger Things always is a consistent factor in this show and continues to be one in the 5th season. I think it's probably a fine line for any costume designer or hair and makeup artist to find something that looks good on camera and that looks good on the actor, but that doesn't look like a cliche and like a costume. And I think they do a really good job of that. I also noticed a lot of the times this season that the costume choices were not only a reflection of references to something pop culture related in the 80s, but that also is kind of speaking about what the character is dealing with at this point in the season. For example, when Nancy and everyone else was going into the abyss in the final episode, she kind of had this like Rambo-esque outfit on, and it not only kind of reflects the fact that A, Nancy has never met a gun that she doesn't like, but B, it kind of reflects her attitude of like she's going to do absolutely whatever it takes to get her sister back, and she just does not give a fuck, which is kind of the vibe of Rambo. Holly was also wearing a dress that was very likened to Alice in Wonderland, and again, it wasn't an overt costume of Alice in Wonderland, but it was just kind of like likening a little bit of that imagery, and also reflected kind of a similar storyline with Alice and Holly. They're in unfamiliar territory where not everything might be as it seems, and I like these details, and I think that they're not only kind of like fun little Easter eggs, but they also just show a little bit of thought and consideration that the costume designers are putting to reflect what the character is going through. I will say that the person who decided to put Elle in a slick back bun and a wetsuit for 90% of this movie, I do think that person deserves a little bit of jail time if I'm being honest. But other than that, the costume and hair and makeup people did a really, really good job. I also think, kind of consistently with other seasons, the people who do the actual practical, tangible sets of Stranger Things always do a really good job. Every set is rich with detail, it feels lived in, it feels realistic, it helps to immerse me into the story, and I think that's really cool. As far as the score and the musical choices of Stranger Things Season 5, I think obviously the score of Stranger Things has kind of become iconic at this point. Every song that's played in the background is kind of an iteration or a modification of the iconic main theme, where there's like a very synthy 80s futuristic science fiction vibe, and I think it always does a good job of setting the tone and kind of enhancing the scene to elevate it, to make it feel a little bit more emotional for whatever's going on. I will say though, as far as the actual choices with music go, like the song choices, I will say whoever the person was that chose the song Landslide to play in the final episode, I felt like that was a really great song selection. It fit the mood, it fit what was going on. I felt emotions, the characters were feeling emotions, so I felt like it was definitely super appropriate and a very, very good song choice for that. However, to the person who decided to pick the song Purple Rain in the final episode, I am now speaking directly to you.
I now speak directly to you.
What the fuck was that? Okay, so for those of you who don't remember, let me just walk with me here for a second. So in the final episode, Murray and Hopper rigged all of these explosives in the Upside Down so that they could basically collapse the Upside Down, destroy it forever, and give themselves enough time to escape out of the Upside Down before the explosions go off. The way that they do that is they rig everything to a vinyl record player and they choose a record to play, so when it's done, then the explosives will go off, but everyone will be out by then, so everyone will be safe. They decide to play Purple Rain, like the soundtrack Purple Rain. I love Prince, may he rest. So they're playing When Doves Cry, everybody's vibing, blah, 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 everything's good. Then they're greeted by the military, because let's not forget that Hopper did kill a lot of soldiers, and they all kind of killed a lot of soldiers to do this whole Vecna mission. And they're looking for Elle, because that's what they've been doing the entire fucking season. They are obsessed with her in a very strange way. Elle has had it in her brain that she was going to sacrifice herself this entire time, and now the time has come. So she connects with Mike's subconscious and basically explains to him that this is what she has to do. She wants to end the cycle, and Mike is like distraught. I'm distraught. It's a very emotional scene. And then as this like emotional, heart-wrenching montage of her friendships with everybody starts to play, you just hear the loudest possible overlay of Purple Rain playing in the background. I could not believe what I was hearing, because it felt so disjointed. It felt like such a random choice. Like, I understand they picked that song so that they could have it kind of intertwined with the explosives and being connected to the vinyl record play and whatever. I understand that, but why did you have to specifically pick that record? Because it really doesn't have any a connection to Elle and Mike and the emotions that are being played right now. Like, it's an emotional song. There's just like a lot of guitar riffs that are playing while you see this emotional montage. I feel like it would have been better maybe if they played a song or a soundtrack that was more interconnected to Mike and Elle specifically. Every Breath You Take, for example. That's another connection to Sting. For those of you who watch my Only Murders in the Building videos, everything is connected to Sting. I felt like it was extremely distracting, and that's especially strange considering that Stranger Things in the past has done a phenomenal job of marrying scenes and music from the 80s to kind of create these iconic, memorable, just really well executed scenes in the past. I was just more confused than any other emotion while it was happening. Also, really quickly want to talk a little bit about CGI and special effects. This is something that we have come to expect, and that's very commonplace not only in films but more recently in a lot of television shows, and Stranger Things is no stranger to using CGI special effects. For me personally, even if the CGI looks a little bit mediocre, it's not a deal breaker for me as long as I'm still able to kind of immerse myself into everything else that's happening. The real difference maker for me with CGI though is how the rest of everything that's going on kind of treats the CGI and whether it's kind of well integrated with the real elements of the story. For example, and I mean I guess this is kind of amazing that I'm wearing this particular sweater right now, in the cinematic masterpiece that is the live action Scooby-Doo adaptation, we have what can only be described as a CGI rendering of Scooby-Doo that just is riddled with early 2000s special effects. It does not look great just looking at it objectively. It does not convince anyone that it's a real dog. It looks a little cartoonish. However, when watching that movie, both as a child and as an adult, I never once felt like it was so bad that it took me out of the movie. I accepted that this was Scooby in the reality of this movie, and I think the reason for that is that everything else in the movie is careful to treat Scooby as real. Like it's like kind of making that integration of the real things and the CGI thing. It's doing it in a convincing way. Every time Matthew Lillard is yelling at Scooby in the movie, in reality, he's probably yelling at a dummy or at nothing, but he's just such a good actor. He is reacting and kind of interacting with the CGI in a way where it's convincing to me that everything is kind of a homogenous finished product. An extreme example in the opposite direction, I don't know, maybe let's just say the prequel trilogy. There's so much CGI and so much like computer generated effects with absolutely everything that has to do with that movie. So excessive to the point where there are like hair-raising, imminent death situations and the actors are not acting appropriately to what's going on, and it's so distracting and it's so jarring that it really immediately, that along with about 1,000 other things, because I'm a chronic prequels hater, immediately takes you out of those movies. It's a very long way of me saying that I think at times Stranger Things kind of teeters on the edge of the prequel aspect of CGI. All of the worlds, like in the Upside Down and in the Abyss, are all computer generated, whatever. And this is the first time that a lot of these characters have been in the Upside Down or been in the Abyss, and it's this like crazy, scary looking monster in front of them, whatever. And I feel like their reactions to a lot of things, they're just having casual conversations about Nancy and their love triangle or whatever, like Steve and Jonathan are talking about that. And it just doesn't feel like you would be having these conversations if you were actually able to see everything that was going on around you. The Upside Down used to kind of represent something that was really scary. Like in season 4, you couldn't even step on any vines without Vecna knowing where you are. This season, they're just walking wherever. They're not having to be careful. And maybe it's because they can't see what's going on. I feel like it's not as scary for me either. I don't know if that's just a me thing. Maybe it didn't really matter to anyone else because there was so much shit going on in other aspects, but yeah. Also, some of the effects, just quality-wise, compared to what they look like in season 4, definitely felt like a little bit of a dip in quality. And again, that's not a huge deal. If maybe some of the other aspects of CGI were better integrated into the story, it wouldn't matter as much, but it felt a little off to me. Okay, let's talk a little bit now about the series finale of Stranger Things. I will say, going through all of my notes about this season and specifically for this next section and just everything that I've said in the video thus far, I don't really necessarily know what I was thinking when I said that I liked about as many things as I disliked, because that seems like a gross overstatement of my positive feelings towards this season. I think I liked maybe realistically like 25% of season 5 and disliked the rest. And I don't know if I was just trying to be diplomatic or what, but I feel like that's probably a little bit more of an accurate assessment. If you liked season 5 and you think like the series finale is God's gift to humanity and God's gift to television, I love that for you. I just clearly do not feel the same way, and I'm going to talk about all the reasons why I don't feel that way, particularly pertaining to the finale. The reasons I did not like season 5's finale is that I thought it was too fucking long. It was literally 2 hours long, which is basically the length of a feature-length film. I watched one of the X-Men movies the other day, and it was an hour and 45 minutes, just a measly hour and 45 minutes, which was less time than it took to get through this finale, which I think is crazy.
It's actually crazy. This is 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 crazy.
If you have that amount of time that you need to be able to sum up everything that's been happening and kind of wrap up all the characters and the story sufficiently to satisfy a series finale, it seems like you would have some sort of editing or pacing issue that exists in the episode itself or in the entire season as a whole, or both. And I do think that there were a lot of things that could have been edited down and revised and cleaned up both in the finale and in the 5th season that could have maybe reduced that runtime to maybe like an hour and 15 minutes. And I'm not trying to be mean. I think 2 hours is just kind of a crazy amount of time for a series finale for any show. I also just found it extremely annoying, like a lot of people did, that nobody died in the series finale. We had this whole crazy plan of all of these characters going into the abyss and going into the upside down and doing all this insane shit so that we can destroy Vecna. And it is insane to me, given the stakes of what we're doing and given the stakes and the consequences of what could happen if we're unsuccessful, and given the danger of what we need to do in order to prevent that from happening, the fact that literally none of the main characters died and didn't even suffer like an injury of any sort whatsoever is absolutely insane to me. And the only person that died was Kali, kind of at the fault of Hopper, kind of pulling like a Star-Lord situation from Infinity War where he did things that very much could have been avoided but were just kind of stupid in the moment that resulted in her death. Everybody else is totally fine, and Elle dies in the explosion, but it's not because she got injured or something went wrong. It's because she volunteered herself because she wanted to sacrifice her life. So it kind of diminishes the impact and the significance of what we're doing, and I think it would have definitely raised the stakes a lot if somebody died or even just someone suffered some sort of injury. There were a lot of fake outs for people's deaths that I found to be very annoying because the writers are very clearly aware of people not wanting their favorite characters to die. But the fact that they were kind of toying with us and not actually committing to anything but just trying to like make audiences nervous in the moment, that was very obnoxious to me, because objectively I think having some people die in this situation, and I'm not trying to wish death on these characters, I like these characters too, but having them die in these instances would elevate the stakes and would show the audience just truly how dangerous this situation is. Because if everybody does everything perfectly and basically everything goes according to plan other than the situation with Kali and her death, it kind of diminishes what we're doing here. It kind of made Vecna look like an idiot. The thing is, we have seen Vecna be actually very terrifying and a very like oppressive force and presence in every character's life so far. The fact that they just seem to kind of like water him down because we really didn't have enough time to deal with this, that felt extremely problematic to me. So the fact that nobody died in this whole plan, I just feel like it just didn't really make any sense to me, and it was very frustrating. I also do think it's really annoying that we didn't fully commit to an answer on whether Elle is actually dead or not. I think it's very obnoxious that they're being wishy-washy about the one main character maybe or maybe not having sacrificed themselves. Like, this girlie does deserve a happy ending. Let's be clear about that. But if she did make that decision and she was dying on her own terms, that's an interesting ending for her character, and I think it has a lot of emotional weight, and I'm okay with that. The fact then that they were like, or maybe not, maybe she's hanging out with some waterfall somewhere, and you guys just make a fucking decision one way or the other. I do find it a little annoying too that everybody gets like a perfect happy ending other than Mike. He is never going to get over any of this ever for the rest of his life. This man seems like he is going to delve into the worst of depressions and will never ever ever talk to a female ever again until he knows if Ella's alive or not. I also feel like the consequences of this finale has broken any bit of lore or world building that Stranger Things has ever attempted to do in the past. Just felt like it was such a broken explanation for everything, and given the fact that the writers keep saying they had this finale in mind from like several years ago and they've been working up to this and they have this clear image of how everything's going to end, this cannot possibly be how you thought everything was going to end, because I feel like you don't understand your own show if this is the case. Let's talk about my list of unanswered questions, because there's a lot of them. What was Hawkins told about the military occupation? I kept thinking about this because you see the plaque in the final episode where it says like those who have died in the earthquake. I understand like maybe in the immediate aftermath of this quote unquote earthquake, maybe the military could help with like allowing people to get relocated if your home was destroyed or whatever. But it's been like almost 2 years and still no one is allowed to leave. If I were a random Hawkins resident, I would be like, what the fuck is going on? Why were there no creatures in the abyss? Duffer Brothers have attempted to kind of troubleshoot this issue and actually have maybe made it worse. Their explanation for there being no creatures in the abyss, they said, first of all, it was a surprise attack, so Vecna didn't know that they were coming. And then also they said that they were worried people were going to have Demogorgon fatigue and didn't want to include them in there. And it's like, okay, I get, but also Diva, you did show us, like, as part of the canon and the lore for this universe, when Vecna gets projectiled into the abyss at the end of season 4, you see just like Demogorgons running around, you see different creatures kind of just running around and existing. So if you're just worried that we're tired of seeing Demogorgons, why not use them less in other scenes and then keep up with the continuity that you yourself have established by including them in the abyss? Or are you just worried that you didn't want to like have legitimate reasons for your characters maybe to be needing to be killed off because there's other monsters that they have to worry about, and you just kind of wanted to make it a little bit easier for them to kill Vecna so that you can dedicate an hour of time to the epilogue of the season? Why was the abyss a desert when the Mind Flayer likes a cold? Why did Henry go to high school? Since when did Henry go to high school? If somebody goes into my comment section and says, well, this was something that was explained in Stranger Things, the first shadow in the Broadway play, I will literally drive to your house and punch you in the face. This is something that needed clarification and we didn't get any clarification, and I don't know if they're just trying to be like, oh, well, maybe you should go see the Broadway play to understand. It's like, well, no, I shouldn't have to do that. That's like a big commitment and a big ask for somebody who's just trying to casually watch this show. And the fact that it kind of like was important because it was embedded into his memories, but also contradicted information that we were already given about him, I don't like that. I think that's annoying. What was the Mind Flayer's motive? Was it just because he's like evil and wants to destroy things? I don't know. It seemed like Vecna's motive in season 4 was that he thought humanity and existence was just trivial and he wanted to create a new existence that was more powerful. And it's like, okay, kind of INTJ of you, but I'll accept it. But it seemed like the Mind Flayer was controlling him. So is that the Mind Flayer's motive? Or is it just like kind of mindlessly destroying things because it can? The whole flashback at the beginning of the season to the day that Will was brought into the Upside Down. Let's talk about that. If you go back to the first episode, season 1, episode 1, you see a figure that Will kind of like runs into or kind of like encounters when he's riding his bike home from Mike's house, and then he locks the door, and of course you see like the door unlocks with what I'm assuming is telekinetic powers. Flash forward to season 5, episode 1, where we have more of an expanded revisiting of that whole situation. You see that a Demogorgon actually was what captured Will and brought him into the Upside Down and like hooked him up to the Mind Flayer. So if a Demogorgon was the one that got Will in the first place, and the Duffer Brothers have gone on record and said that the Demogorgons do not have telekinetic powers, how then did these Demogorgons unlock the door and get into the shed? I really truly feel like whoever is in charge of the Duffer Brothers PR team needs to lock them in a basement and duct tape their mouth shut, because every single explanation they give about something having to do with this 5th season makes it make less sense. Where the fuck is everybody's mom and dad? They've been gone for days at certain points. Like, they have literally no communication with their family. Sometimes they're not touching base with their parents ever. Do your parents give a fuck where you are? Do they care where you are? Kind of branching off of that, is Derek an orphan now? Is his family okay? Why did Henry bludgeon that guy to death? If somebody jumps in the comment section and tells me that this is answered in the first shadow play, I am going to just like scream. If he wasn't necessarily evil yet, why did he brutally murder this guy when he probably could have just like ran away? I don't know. What was the plot convenience goo? It seemed like it was related to that giant spear thing. Maybe it was a product of that, but we weren't given an explanation for what it is and why it just kind of miraculously hardened and didn't melt their faces off like it did all the other skeletons and decaying bodies that they found in the Upside Down. Maybe it was the power of friendship that saved them, guys. I don't know. How the fuck did Max graduate? This is another thing that is like annoying about forcing everyone into a happy ending at the expense of having anything make any sense. Max was literally in a coma for 2 years. Make it make fucking sense. Is nobody in Hawkins going to question what the hell happened to Hopper and why everyone thought he was dead for a year? He literally was like praised as being this hero sheriff, and then he was in a Russian prison, and then he was in hiding with Elle at the beginning of the season in his off-the-grid cabin, and then 18 months later we see that he is now the chief of police again. Like, what explanation did he get? Like, was he like, yeah, I was in a Russian prison, sorry? How is nobody traumatized from all of this? I understand that life moves on and, you know, tragic, terrible things happen and we have to kind of accept them and kind of process grief in our own way and all all of that. But the fact that Mike is the literally only one who is struggling to kind of process everything that they have witnessed and all of the horror that they have endured the last year and a half. Even Max is just like, normal. You were literally trapped in an evil person's brain for a year and a half. How are you so well adjusted? Are those pregnant ladies okay? Probably not, right? We definitely did not escort them out of the premises before putting the explosives in the upside down. Why does the military all of a sudden not care once Elle sacrifices herself? Like, I know that was the main goal, was to find her, and that kind of definitively ruins their chances of being able to duplicate any experiments, because that was the last trace of Vecna, aka Henry's blood. But also, Hopper did kill like a lot of people in the military, and so did like a lot of the other kids, and now we're not like questioning them or taking them into custody. Like, no, Hopper is now the literal chief of police in Hawkins after killing an entire like brigade of people in the army.
After all, he is the piece of chili.
Why did Vecna specifically need 12 kids? I feel like they could have tied it into something having to do with the clocks, but no. What was Vecna doing for the last 18 months? I know that they said at the end of season 4 that he was injured, and even though he was successful, like, you know, Elle kind of beat him up pretty badly. But does that mean that it took him 18 months to kind of regroup with this new plan? It will die if he was part of the hive mind because of the power of friendship, I'm assuming. What happened to Elle's powers? I only bring this up because it seems like the amount of things she can do is like far less than what she was able to do in prior seasons. Who was supposed to be the spy? Apparently the Duffer Brothers said that there was going to be a spy in the 5th season. Was it Will? Was it Kali? Who the fuck was the spy? Okay. So in the aftermath of Stranger Things season 5, like I said, the reaction online of fans to this show, I have never truly seen anything like it. Maybe I just need to watch more controversial television shows, because I either watch things that are just like objectively very good or objectively god awful. It's really fascinating, and I think the more I learn and the more things come to light, it makes me understand why this finale was as strange as it was and why it was so off-putting to so many people. Hello. 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 So in the immediate aftermath of the finale, I was not able to watch the finale on New Year's Day, but I wanted to just kind of see what people were saying about it so I could kind of mentally prepare myself for what to expect. After seeing people's like initial reaction in the first 12 hours or so, it seemed like the general consensus was that, yeah, this isn't the best thing I've ever seen in my entire life, and it's definitely got a lot of issues, but there are really good emotional moments, and we love these characters so much, and the way that the character stuff was resolved, I feel like this is a sufficiently satisfactory finale for us. And I was like, oh, okay, sick. It's better than volume 2. How bad could it be? But then the more time passed, it seemed like a lot of people kind of realized and kind of ruminated on what they just watched and what they were subjected to, and started to kind of think about maybe some of the more glaring flaws of Stranger Things, and kind of landed on, you know, maybe this isn't as good as we initially thought. And I can understand that, because a lot of the finale feels like you're kind of getting emotionally waterboarded. I think the consensus online is mostly at this point that the finale was not very good, and the more things that have been coming out about the finale are just making it seem more and more mediocre. It was actually so odd and so off-putting to so many people, in fact, that in the immediate couple days after the finale aired, a lot of people online started circulating what became known as Conspiracygate. Now, Conspiracygate is a conspiracy theory that was created in like the couple days after Stranger Things aired its final episode, and it kind of threw out this idea essentially that the finale was not actually the finale, but there's also going to be a secret episode that was going to air, I think, on January 7th, and that had something to do with the amount of days since Will was kid. I don't know. It had something to do with something in season 1. I don't know. And essentially this theory suggested that the finale felt weird because it was supposed to feel weird. It was intended to feel very over the top in kind of like giving a happy ending to everybody, because that's what Vecna wanted you to see, because everybody has all these powers where they can make you see what they want you to see, they can make you see illusions, all of that. And maybe Vecna was putting the audience under a trance because they want you to think that everything is all cool and good, feel almost like something is off, and then reveal the actual episode a couple days later is much darker and has a more, you know, gritty and not as happy ending, because that's really what's going on. And I think that's a really cool idea in theory, but I knew it wasn't going to happen because Netflix is never going to be that creative with its branding, and neither are the Duffer Brothers. After seeing what they wrote this entire season, there's no way they would cook up something like this. Nevertheless, a lot of big fans of the show were convinced that this was going to happen. Lo and behold, nothing happened, because conspiracy gate doesn't exist. I feel like it is hilarious to me that your show is just so objectively disliked by the vast majority of your fans that they are doing literal mental gymnastics and creating elaborate theories that are gaining significant traction on the internet to justify how bad your writing is and being like, oh, obviously this isn't the finished product because this would be bad. And the Duffer Brothers are just like, so I thought that's really funny. Now, speaking specifically about the Duffer Brothers of it all. Now, if you're not aware at this point, the Duffer Brothers are the creators of Stranger Things and the writers for a lot of their episodes. They're basically the creative mind behind this entire series. One of the reasons why I specifically am kind of struggling to see this season in a positive light has a lot to do with both the expectation that the Duffer Brothers set for this season prior to it airing, and then a lot of the comments that they have made in its aftermath. Prior to season 5, like I said, there was a lot of anticipation, a lot of hype surrounding the final season because of how long it took to put together and for it to air on Netflix. The Duffer Brothers, understandably so, were kind of doing a lot of interviews, teasing things, getting people excited, and some of the questions that they were answering and the way that they were answering these questions definitely set a certain expectation for what we were going to expect in this final season. The Duffer Brothers have gone on record saying that there was going to be one of the most violent deaths in Stranger Things in this final season. Is the violent death in the room with us? I don't know if maybe they're referring to the off-camera death that Millie Bobby Brown may or may not have had when she went into the explosion in the Upside Down. Maybe it didn't happen because we're walking that back too. I don't know, but that seems like an objective lie. So there's that. The Duffer Brothers have also said that there's going to be a lot of answers to certain questions, including but not limited to who opened the door in season 1, like who opened the little lock thing. And we were also told by the Duffer Brothers that the Demogorgons don't have the ability to have telekinetic power. So you're assuming that it's probably going to be Vecna. Cut to the scene where we see the Demogorgon take Will to the Upside Down in season 1, episode 1, even though they told us that they don't have superpowers like that. It's things like this. I think they also said, too, there was going to be a traitor in the final season. I don't know. Maybe they were doing such a good job they didn't even reveal their secret traitorous identity. They also said that they were going to avoid adding new characters in the final season. They're kind of circling back to, going back to basics from season 1. Cut to this season that not only introduces Holly Wheeler essentially as a new character, but also including her class of 11 other students that we don't know, and then also bringing back Holly from season 2, we're not introducing anybody other than these 14 people that you don't know very well.
So that was a fucking lie.
What they were promising prior to this season did not at all correlate to what actually happened, and it seemed like a lie. There's no way that it could be it's subject to interpretation. No, it literally just seemed like they were lying to everyone's face to get people excited for this final season. In response to the negative criticism of Stranger Things season 5, the Duffer Brothers had turned to damage control mode and have gone on a lot of podcasts and done a lot of interviews kind of addressing some of the loose ends and the things that people are pointing to as issues with this final season. I'm not saying that their answers are making the final season worse, but it's definitely not making it better at all. It's definitely not making it better. And mostly the reason for that is because they're trying to address some of these loose ends and unanswered questions or things that just need basic clarity. And their explanations either add additional murkiness to our understanding of what's going on, or they're just I don't know. It's a good point. I didn't even think about that. And it just kind of illuminates to me that maybe this isn't just me not understanding or me misinterpreting something with this final season. Maybe it's just written by two people who were not very equipped to wrap this story up. There are a couple theories as to why maybe they struggled more with this 5th season, because keep in mind too, they had 3 years to cook all of this up, and you would think the way you're setting things up in season 4, you would have some sort of vague idea in your mind of how everything is going to turn out. There's a picture of the behind the scenes of writing the script for Stranger Things, and they pointed out that they had ChatGPT open on their computer screen, and people are suggesting that maybe they resorted to AI and ChatGPT to write a lot of the part of the script because a lot of the dialogue and the way certain things happened sounded very strange. They did clarify, I think, that wasn't what happened, but I don't know how you could possibly admit to that because that makes you look horrible. I saw something also online, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, so if it's not, please don't come for me, that suggested that maybe one of the Duffer Brothers' spouses was one of the ones that was contributing to the writing of the show in the past, and they had recently gone through a divorce, and because maybe she wrote the first version of the finale of Stranger Things, they had to kind of scramble and rewrite it. I don't know if that necessarily makes any sense, but I saw a couple people talking about that, so it's worth mentioning. There was also the documentary that was released in the last couple weeks about the making of Stranger Things season 5, and there were also additional revelations that I don't think necessarily made the Duffer Brothers look very good. They did admit at certain points in this documentary that they did not have the script ready when they went into production for Stranger Things season 5, and they even started filming certain aspects of the finale before they had a concrete script in place. They also said that they received a lot of pressure from Netflix because they wanted to go in production without having a script fully written at that point, and it's like, yeah, damn that production company for making you do your fucking job. And you also see just some of like the behind the scenes of like certain crew members or cast members asking certain questions about why things are happening in a particular way, like why there aren't any demogorgons running around in the Upside Down or in the Abyss, and them being like, yeah, okay, that's a good point. And then there's no resolution to it. It generally doesn't make the Duffer Brothers look very good. It doesn't make them look very competent, and it just, again, kind of reinforces to me that maybe they just kind of phoned it in with this final season and didn't necessarily put as much thought and attention to it as they should have. And that's really a shame. Oh my God. This was a lot. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. Let me know in the comment section what you want me to talk about next. I think for my next video, I had the idea of maybe like doing a very quick video catching you guys up on what I've been watching so far in 2026. I did that a little bit in my prior video about the best and worst thing I watched in 2025, and I feel like it would be fun to just kind of catch you guys up on what I've been watching lately. So if that's something that you're interested in, let me know in the comment section. Otherwise, I think I'm going to shift my attention to maybe talking about Daredevil Born Again, because that's going to be releasing next month. I don't know. I don't really know which way the wind will blow and which topic of conversation I will find compelling at any given moment. So, oh, I thought I saw the spider, but it was just a piece of lint on my ceiling. Anyway, I am going to go pay attention to my cat because otherwise she's going to murder me in my sleep. Bye!